Second book of Samuel, chapter 2. Second book of Samuel, chapter 2. You think, what on earth has all this Samuel got to do with rejection? You will be amazed. Second Samuel, chapter 4. And I just want to encourage everybody to be open to the Holy Spirit this morning. You know, I don't think this applies to the person sitting next to you. Just think, how does this apply to me? 2 Samuel chapter 4, and let me read the first four verses, and I want to set the scene of what happened in Israel and Judah, so we understand the context of this. But from verse 1, when Saul's son heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost heart, and all Israel was troubled. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were captains of troops. The name of one was Banner, and I need my glasses, and the name of the other was Rechab. The sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, of the children of Benjamin, for Beeroth also was part of Benjamin. I should have ignored those 2 verses. Because the Beerothites fled to Gittaim and have been sojourners. Just imagine, I'm poking fun at myself. Just imagine trying to say all them words if you stuttered. We'll have a chat about it. That goes through my mind. I'm just telling you what goes through my mind while I'm speaking it, because that thought just enters my head. I think it's quite funny. But anyway, because the Beerothites fled to Gittaim and had been sojourners there until this day, Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. And he was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened that as she made haste to flee, that he fell, and in some translations it says that she dropped him. And he became lame, and his name was Mephibosheth. Now, to set the scene, King Saul had died. King Saul was obviously the leader of Israel, and Abner was the commander-in-chief of the Israelite army. And they heard that King Saul had died in Jezreel, and at this point they hadn't heard that Jonathan had died. But so King Saul had died. Abner was the second in command, the commander-in-chief, and he appointed Ishbosheth as the new king over Gilead, the Asherites, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and all of Israel, except Judah. King David was king over Judah. And Israel and Judah were at war. Okay, it's great. They all came from the 12 tribes, and now they hate each other. They're at war. But to cut a long story short, Abner, the commander-in-chief, also dies at Hebron. And now the king had died, the commander-in-chief had died, and the whole of the army was all over the place. They were leaderless. Yeah, King Ishbosheth was appointed king by Abner, but he also got murdered. So Jonathan was the only remaining son of Saul. But then word came that not only did King Saul get killed, but Jonathan had been killed as well at Jezreel. Now, we know that Jonathan was King David's armor bearer. We read that in earlier chapters of Samuel, that he stood with him, with David, fought with David, protected David, served with David. He was faithful and loyal to David. But not only had King Saul died, but his heir had died, Jonathan. But then we find out in verse 4 of chapter 4 that Jonathan had a son. So who is Mephibosheth. Now you'd presume, and you've seen the monarchy in Britain, from King Charles, it goes to King William, or Prince William. It will go to him, and then to his oldest son. Now, just imagine if all those people got murdered. Okay, so that's the state that they're in. Now, because there'd been a war, because they were battling, Israel and Judah were at war, and they'd heard that Jonathan and Saul had died, the presumption would be, well, they're going to be after the heir to the throne. So the nurse picks him up and tries to run away. Now, whether she was clumsy or whether whatever, we don't know. But either way, one translation says she drops him, another person says he fell. Long and short of it was that he was unable to walk. He was crippled physically. But just imagine a 5-year-old person whose father had died, his grandfather had died, and then was trying to escape. The nurse was trying to do the right thing, was trying to escape to protect the lineage. He gets hurt. So as a 5-year-old growing up, he lost his inheritance. He lost it. He should have been an incredibly wealthy man, but he lost his inheritance. His father had died, his grandfather had died, his heir, his title, everything had gone. All because of what had happened. Now, not only would that leave you physically impaired, but it would leave you emotionally and mentally impaired as well. Just imagine you're waiting for somebody in your family to die because you know you're going to get an inheritance, and when they die, they give it to the Battersea Dogs Home. You're going to be well chuffed, aren't you? Because you're thinking, well, I was entitled to that money. That's what normally happens. And they've given it to Battersea Dogs Home. You wouldn't be very happy, would you? You wouldn't come down, sit there, all villagers say, oh no, not me. You would. You wouldn't be happy. You wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be happy. Would you? I wouldn't be happy. But, so, Mephibosheth has got nothing. Physically lame. He'd have had that self-rejection and that self-hate because he couldn't walk, he couldn't do the things he was supposed to do. He'd lost his status, he'd lost everything that he sort of had, and he would have felt inferior, and he'd have been depressed. In fact, if you look at the word it's a funny word, Mephibosheth, what that word means is from the mouth of a shameful thing. From the mouth of a shameful thing. It's important in the Bible times, the name of a person meant something. In this nation, we just call people Trevor and John and Steve for the fun of it. We just call a person's name. We don't think of what does that word mean. Does it mean anything? We just call them a name that we like, or a grandfather's name or something. But in Bible times, they chose a name because it represented something. And Mephibosheth, his name meant from the mouth of a shameful thing. He was broken. If we go to 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 4, there's an interesting thing. Because King David, through what had happened, time had passed, and he suddenly thought, well, hang on a second, I want to know, is there an heir from King Saul? Because I want to do something to help that person. And through a bit of history, perhaps it was ancestor.com or something like that, they found Mephibosheth. And in 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 4, he says, so the king said, where is he? Where is Mephibosheth? Well, actually, let me read verse 3. Is there not still someone of the house of Saul, to whom I may show the kindness of God? That's what David wanted to do. And he said, and Ziba said, I love these names. Ziba said to the king, there is still a son of Jonathan, who is lame in his feet. Oh, great, we found somebody. We found an heir. So the king said to him, where is he? Ziba said to the king, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, in Lo-debar. You think, okay, we just read that. What's the word Lo-debar mean? It means barren. It means infertile. It means where there's no growth. So Mephibosheth was living a shameful life, living in a city that was barren, that was known for being barren, infertile, no pasture, no growth. And we just read these things in the Bible as though that's just a weird name. He lives in a place called Lo-debar. I've heard of that place, I've seen that in Lo-debar, and so we move on. But everything, there's a reason behind every name. And unfortunately, for many people, many Christians live in the same place where Mephibosheth lives, in a place called Lo-debar. You say, I don't, I live in Kings Winford. But emotionally, you live in a place called Lo-debar, where you are barren, you are infertile, where there's no growth in your life. In other words, you live in a life where you feel inadequate, inferior, where you're lacking things in your life. You are coming short of things that should be in your life. And because of these things, that shame that Mephibosheth experienced was indicated by what he said, which is important. Because if we read what Mephibosheth says, when King David went to him and said, I'm David, you're the son of Jonathan, he turns round and says to him, "What is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I?" Now, if you were sat there, now you might think, well, that's a bit poetic language, but you know the intent of his heart. Anyone who sits there and says, "Why you want to talk to me for when I am such a dead dog as I am a useless pile of nothing with no hope and no future, why would you want to talk to me?" And unfortunately, a lot of Christians live in the same place. Because we put on a front when we walk through that door with all smiles, but when we go home and when we go from here, we carry the same bags that we came in with. And those bags are, well, I feel inadequate, I feel inferior, I feel useless, I feel that no one really cares about me, no one loves me. But we carry those things around with us all the time. And that becomes our norm. See, for some people, stuttering has become the norm. So they don't bother to try and get healed from it. But for me, I would look at other people and say, well, normal is not stuttering. So I must be not normal. So let me do something about this to get rid of the thing that's making me, unfortunate word, abnormal. I want to get rid of that. And, you know, Mephibosheth, I've got to come up with a different word. Perhaps I should call him Stanley. Stan says, it's a lot easier. He'd experienced rejection from people. He'd experienced rejection from his home. And he lived in a place where he felt he was useless. And yet we say we are born again. Spirit of God lives inside of us. And, you know, we are pushing forward to be more Christ-like. But you know what? That rejection has become a normal thing for us. And how do we know that? And I'm going to explore this as I go on. By the way, our attitude is by our behaviour, by the things we say. Because when we look at people, some people's attitude and things they say and their behaviour is not normal. I ain't going to look at anyone because I don't want anyone to moan at me. But I want to explore what rejection is, its causes, its effects, and how to identify it and how to deal with it. Because rejection affects relationships. Rejection affects relationships. And you know what? Rejection is not just the baby that was given up by her parents, or a brother and sister that was favoured more than you were, even though those are rejective issues. Rejection comes in many, many, many forms, and I'm going to go through. One definition, and this is the simplest definition. I want to give a bit more detail in a moment. Rejection is the ability to give and receive love properly. Yeah, but I'm married. Yeah, but I love my kids. Really? Inability to give or receive love properly. And rejection is often linked back to a person's childhood. We see with Mephibosheth, he was 5 years of age when all that trauma happened to him. And you know, for many people, trauma happens at different parts of a person's life. And everyone has suffered rejection to some form or another. Rejection can affect us generationally. You look back at how grandparents and great-grandparents behaved and the things that they did and said, and you can see how it can potentially affect because they behave in a certain way, and then the children copy that behaviour, and then they behave in a certain way, and then you see how it progresses generationally. But now it's important to note that even though rejection is around, it doesn't mean there has never been any love in a person's home. Because when you say to people, rejection is sometimes inability to give or receive love. Well, I came from a loving family. I never said you didn't come from a loving family. But when the person at school bullies you for a certain reason, or when your wife leaves you, or when some trauma happens in your family, that's got nothing to do with whether there's love in your family or not. That's something that's happened to you. And what we can't live, and I am going to just hit this one on the head now, don't ever think because of this we're victims. We are not victims. Don't have a victim mentality where a person walks away religiously. I'm jumping ahead of my notes here, because religious people, I'm talking church now, don't care about those who are not saved. In a nice, I'm talking about church. Religious people will always walk, how dare you treat me like that? Oh, I'm a victim here. You shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have done that. Actually, that person never said or did anything wrong. You are overreacting to something that was done and said because you're perceiving it through glasses of rejection. And then you say, oh, I'm a victim, look at me, everybody listen. Listen to what Keith did to me. Listen to what Keith said to me. Well, actually, Keith didn't do anything wrong. You are perceiving it wrong because of the rejection that's in your heart. So, how do you feel rejected? Let me just say this, it's one of the biggest undiagnosed problems in the church today. It ruins relationships because people react out of rejection, and it destroys relationships often. Oh, I've just done the first one. How do we feel rejected? Well, I've just said. Number 2, we feel unwanted at times, and it brings a sense of worthlessness or valueless, which leads to a feeling of being inadequate, inferior, or insecure. And then at times we feel guilty, and then that leads us to be honest. Yeah, thank you. Who did that? That's very good. So we feel unwanted. That leads us to being worthless or feeling valueless. And then at times, because of that, we have this ingrained feeling that we are inadequate. We are inferior. Let me just say this. This has been in my heart for weeks, and I haven't said it, but I'm going to say it now. There is somebody here whose brother was treated. You think your brother was picked and chosen and treated better than you were. And ever since that happened when you was a little boy, you've carried this thing that your brother was chosen and treated better than you. And you have an issue with rejection because you've taken that experience as a child in you. And you've carried around this, that you think your parents, you wanted to do something and your parents asked your brother to do it. And you wanted to do it and then never let you do it. And then you walk away thinking, well, that's not fair, that's not right. How dare they do that? And then that root of rejection has got in your life. That's a side issue. But we feel insecure and we feel full of guilt, and then we start to reject ourselves. Our defences go up. Common thing. You won't do that to me again. Because we fear further rejection, because we've been hurt so many times in the past that it ain't going to come to me again. Because I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. It never happened to me again. So then we close off. The barrier goes up, and then we put on a smile. Hello, we're in church, God bless you. But then we've still got the barrier up. Our relationships are measured because we want to be in control. Control it. I tell you, I'm going to get control in a minute. But we don't want to. So we pull away from people. You ain't going to happen to me again. It ain't going to happen to me. I'm going to keep away from you. In fact, I'm not going to talk to you. Let me talk to these people. It looks like I'm happy. And all the time we're ignoring that person here that we perceive as rejecting us. When that person didn't reject you, you just think they did because of previous hurts. So we cut them off and reject them. Here we go, the cycle starts again. Because you've rejected people, then you start to. You've been rejected, then you reject people. How can a person really feel rejected when we've been unconditionally and accepted by the love of God? That's the question. Because the love of God hasn't touched you in those areas where you're carrying the hurt and the rejection from past experiences that have happened in your life. And even in your relationship with God, you control how much you would do. And you see, this is where people get religious, because they control what God can and can't do in their life. They put up the rampart and say, you know what, only so much, no more. I'll even raise my hands and wiggle my bum in church. It looks like I'm really into it. Then people think I'm really into it. But you know what? Deep down, I've got this sense that I'm nothing. I've been rejected. It's far too easy for people to feel rejected when they've been rejected in the past. Because you just think that when someone says something to you, you presume they're rejecting you, when they're not. Can I use you as an example, Lorraine? So Lorraine comes. Oh, you're late, Lorraine. Lorraine, how dare you speak to me like that? I've had enough of people like you saying things like that. So then she walks away in a huff. No, she doesn't do that. That's not Lorraine. That's why I'm picking on Lorraine. Oh, how dare you speak to me like that? Well, actually, I was being really caring, because is everything okay? I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. But you perceived me questioning because people have said. Then you find out. I don't know. When you worked for a head, and that head started having to go at people and you for being late or doing something when that wasn't the case, and then you took that unforgiveness and that hurt from something that was said. And now any time someone says something to you like, "Oh, you're late, is everything okay?" You think I'm having a go at you. And yeah, I'm not having a go at you at all. I was just actually concerned. But we look through it through the glasses of rejection. So we think people have rejected us all the time when they're not. And you know, rejection finds it hard to really allow people into their life properly, to receive love. And they don't fully understand what love is. Because you can't, as I've said many times, you can't give what you don't have. And if you've not received love and you don't really possess a fat lot of it, how can you give it to other people? So you withhold from people. See, rejection can start as early as when you're a child. It can start as far back as when you're in your mother's womb. I never wanted you. But you don't really know that your mom didn't want you until you're 24, when your sister or your brother says, "Actually, did you know you were an accident and your mom didn't want you?" And then for all these years, you've been carrying around this sense of, well, I just don't feel loved. I don't feel as though anyone bothers with me. Or because it goes back to when you was in your mom's womb and they used to speak over you. There's power when you're unborn, what you say over children. And then you've got this in your mind, in your heart, and a root. And I'm going to explain about roots in a minute, but a root of rejection takes place. And through trauma and negative circumstances, so we build layer upon layer upon layer of rejection. You're bullied at school. I was there. Bullied. I started school late. Do you want my story? Whistle stop talk. I'm a kid. They find I've got Perth disease. I'm in a wheelchair. I can't go to school because it's not wheelchair friendly. The headmaster couldn't care less, so I stayed at home. So I started school when I'm about 7.5. I go to school. I can't walk very well because I'm learning to walk again. I get to school, I'm a nervous wreck. I really am. I'm just like rabbit in headlights going to school. All these kids running around. I've been used to being sat at home on the settee. So I go to school. All these kids everywhere. You get picked on by the kids, you get bullied by the children, you get bullied by the teachers because I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know, I told you the story, I don't know I could go to the toilet, so I sit there and wet myself in the class because I didn't know I could put my hand up and ask to go to the toilet because no one had told me. So I'm sat there with all this going on. Then I'm stuttering. Well, you can imagine now the ridicule. You know what I mean? This guy, he can't even talk properly, and you can't walk properly, and you're an idiot, and you don't know what you're doing. So the shame and the rejection that comes through that starts to take root. Then my grandfather, my mum's not here, but she'll listen to the video, but so my grandfather, my mum's dad, God bless him, he favours certain people in the family, and I'm not one of them. So like he favoured, he gives them things, he buys them things, he takes them places. Me, he ain't bothered with. He don't talk to you very much, he don't give you anything, he's not really interested in what you're doing, he just moans at you. So you get it from school, you get it from your family. I've got a good life, haven't I? And I'm stuttering. And I have no confidence, I'm all over the place. People thought I was a sweet little boy. The reason why I was a sweet little boy was because I never said anything. Because I was too scared to speak, so they just thought, oh, you're even a cute kid. I was too scared to speak. The only thing I could do was sing. So I used to sing. I like music. But I've got all those things. And you know what? You get into your teenage years, and I go to college. I was top of my college, God bless me. I was top of my college. I loved it. I loved economics. I loved that type of thing. Everything changed. I got saved at 17. I got born again at 17. God changes my life instantly. But I'm still stuttering. And it takes me from 17 to mid-30s to peel back the onion of this rejection and that rejection and that rejection, and dealing with this and dealing with that, and growing in this and dealing with that, and crying 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 some more, to walk through and work through the issues. Yeah, was it painful? By Jove, it was very painful. Did you want to go through it? I'm a bit of a weird bloke, because my eyes was always on, well, if I come through this, then all this will have been dealt with. Bring it on. Let me just get through this. Let me get through this. I've got to get through this. If I can get through this, then my life's going to be better. Some people won't pay the price, but I wanted to. I'm thinking, I've come so far, I've got to keep going. I've got to get through this. And what held my purpose was God said certain things to me, and that's what I was determined to fulfill the purpose of God for my life. It's layer upon layer upon layer of rejections and trauma that come into our life that we don't deal with. A deeper definition is that there, Vanessa. A deeper, just put them all on, is to refuse or to acknowledge or accept. So have you been in a place where people haven't acknowledged your presence? People haven't acknowledged that you're any good. People don't accept you, don't accept the way you are. You know, yeah, God says he doesn't leave us or forsake us. Have you ever felt forsaken? People have just left you on your trolley, on your own, and they've all gone, and you're just there, feeling abandoned, like, oh great, really no mate, I'm on my own here. You've been cast aside as useless. Other people have, you know, don't laugh when I make this comment, you. But when I was little and I started to play football, I was always the last person to be picked. Okay? Because I couldn't walk, could I? I was just learning to walk. Until I started to run and I got stronger and stronger, then I made the team. But when you're young, you're cast aside as useless. You don't know what you're doing, you can't do this. How many times have we, all of you, been in a situation where you think you can do something? In fact, you know you can do it, but you've been looked over by somebody else, and you felt that sense of rejection. I knew I could have done that. To discard as unwanted, this is a killer. To discard as unwanted. Just, throw him on the scrap heap. Go on. Not interested in you. Don't want to talk to you. You mean nothing to me. And look, I've got to say, that's how people who've been divorced can feel. If you are the one whose husband or wife has left you, you can feel like that. To refuse to love. My grandfather, God bless him, and all who sailed in him, refused to love. He chose my two cousins over me, my auntie's two sons. He chose them over me. He wasn't interested in me. Give them, buy them things, take them on holiday, give them pocket money, buy them this, give them that. Me, nothing. Nothing at all. I can say it because it was the way it was. I've got no upset, you know, I don't have an issue with him. He died in my arms, my grandfather, which I think is enough said in itself. He died there and then, and so did all this with him. But that's the effect that rejection has. But yet the Bible says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. The Bible says that we are the apple of God's eye. The Bible says that we're loved and accepted. But sometimes we don't feel loved and accepted, do we? Be honest. Come on, don't sit there and say, oh yes, I feel so wonderful, I'm accepted. Come on, we say it, but it doesn't always connect with us inside. It doesn't. See, because rejection is a self-wound. It's a wound. We're hurt on the inside. Just imagine if they got Zambuk for the inside person, not just for your outside. Be great, wouldn't it? Be fabulous, wouldn't it? Zambuk for the inner man. There's a business opportunity, Derek. Zambuk for the inner man. But because we've been rejected and we're hurt, you know, we just feel scarred, we just feel let down, unwanted, unloved, no one's bothered with me. When this gets a hold of us, sometimes we just laugh it off. Sometimes we just push it to one side. But sometimes it actually takes root in our lives. And how do we know it takes root in our life? And I'm going to explain this now. I've got time. I'm going quick. How do I know it takes root in our life? Because we see it with behavior an attitude. That's how it comes out. You go to a field where, here we go, we are hurt on the inside and then exhibit behavioural patterns and attitudes that are normal. We think they're normal, but onlookers look at us and they see they're not. You look at a tree. We've spoken about trees before. But you know, my dad used to have 3 apple trees in our back garden. And the apples were beautiful, gorgeous. But when an apple, or all the apples on the tree started to rot, or if they grew and they were pollinated and the apples grew and they developed and they were rotten, it wouldn't be a problem with the apple. It wouldn't be a problem with the tree. It would be a problem with the root of the tree. If you want to change the rotten fruit on a tree, you don't just pick off the apple off the tree and hope next time the apple comes back sweet, tastes nice, and all the rest of it. You have to deal with the root of the problem, the root system of the tree. And when things have happened to us, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it takes root in your life. Now, we never choose to be rejected, okay? So we haven't got to sit there all funny. We don't choose it. We don't sit there and say, oh yes, please reject me as much as you can. We don't do that, do we? You know, people do it. And they sometimes do it on purpose, and some people don't even do it intentionally. They just don't even realise the way they're treating you. My grandfather, I got a clue. It's just the way he was. Strange man, just the way he was. Because of all his own issues. But I vowed that I'm never going to take that, because I could take that behaviour upon myself, and then I could live the same way. That stays with him. That was dealt with years ago. It stays with him. It ain't coming anywhere near me. King David came to Mephibosheth and said to him, let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 9. And he said, is there still anyone who is left in the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba. And when she called him to David, the king said, are you Ziba? Yes. There is someone called Mephibosheth. And he called himself, as we said, a dead dog. But David, the intention of King David was to take him and to give him his rightful inheritance. Give it him back. What he lost from after his grandfather and father died, King David wanted to give him back. Not only give him the inheritance back, but he wanted him to sit at the king's table and eat for the rest of his life. Don't we see that in Psalm 23? I will prepare a table before you in the presence of your enemies. And sometimes those people who rejected us become our enemies. Come on, don't act like they don't, because they do. But God says, through King David, to Mephibosheth, and God said it to us this morning, you may have had this happen to you previously. But you know what? I want to give you everything that you missed out on. And I want to get you, and I want to invite you to sit at my table and eat with me for the rest of your life. Now, I think that's an incredible thing. Now, you may have seen this done before, but I've got a £10 note in my pocket. I remembered to bring this morning. What's the value of this £10 note? 10 quid. It's new. It's worth £10. It don't matter where you go. It doesn't matter what shop you go into. But if I screw it all up so it's been battered and bruised and beaten, what's the value of that? Now, still 10 quid. The value hasn't changed. And if I throw that on the floor and rub it in this dirty floor, because I'm sure it hasn't been cleaned properly, but if I was to rub this across the dirty floor and put my shoes on it and just walk around the floor, it would pick up all the dust and the dirt. But what would the value of the £10 still be? £10. So it doesn't matter what this goes through, the value is still the same. It doesn't matter what you go through with things that have happened to you, your value to God is still the same. It doesn't change. And yet we feel sometimes, because of the things we've gone through, we are valueless, we are worthless, we are nothing, we are inferior, we are insecure about certain things. And you know what? I've said this many times here. People leave church not because of God, they leave church because of people. And people get offended because they've misunderstood things. They get upset with people when things have been said which weren't meant to upset them, but they took it the wrong way. People react like that all the time and then walk away. And yet God is saying, come on guys, don't just walk away. And I'm looking at the toilet now, so I'm not going to tell you what. Don't just walk away. There are issues here that I am saying, listen, this is the right time for you to look at them and work through them, so that you don't have to stay the same anymore. I've said this before, your future depends on it. And you know, you saw Mephibosheth when he was dropped, he was lame, his life went nowhere. He felt inferior, inadequate, worthless. His life was going nowhere. Don't matter what he thought, his life was going nowhere. And for some of us, until we deal with some of these things, our life cannot go anywhere. Doesn't matter how much we think, oh yes it will. No, you're wrong, it won't. Because these things are crippling us on the inside. And God says, come on, let me deal with it. I'm not going to deal with it. Well, fine, crack on. How does it affect us? We've said before that we are spirit, soul and body. We know that when we got born again, our spirit came alive. And our human spirit is a spiritual source. And the Bible says that everything flows out of our spirit. It says that if you read in Proverbs 18, let me just read Proverbs 18 verse 4. Proverbs 18 verse 4. 14 even. Proverbs 18. The spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? The spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness. From the innermost being, we are alive to God. That's where the Holy Spirit communes with us. Through the Spirit of God connecting with our human spirit, this is where this is where we relate to God. And yet, hurts and wounds will affect us through trauma, circumstances of life, and that affects our spiritual source, our human spirit. It affects us on the inside. That's why some people struggle with the Holy Spirit. To know him and to go deeper with him. You can go so far, but you don't go much further. It's not because God wanting lack of desire from God, it's because of there were blockages in front of us. From our soul and our mind, you know, we have emotions, we have a mind. Our personality is formed by our will, the area of decision and choice. Our intellect is the area of thought and reasoning. Our emotions is that area of feeling. And if someone has said something to you or done something to you, and it affects you emotionally, unless you deal with it, it will take root in your life. That is why forgiveness is a massive thing. When you can forgive a person, you are beginning to uproot the root of rejection, which I'm going to hopefully explain in 5 minutes. Rejection affects our memory. Different people. I know people who you talk to them about their childhood that was not good. They perceived it as being bad. And they can't remember things. You hear people say, this happened to this, I can't remember that, can't remember that, can't remember that, can't remember that. And you're thinking, weren't you there in your own life? That you can't remember all these things. Rejection, why did it affect our memory in that way? Because for some people, we try and block out the memory of the hurt and the pain. And we don't want to deal with it. If we can act like it never happened, then we can just move on in life. The problem is, it's still there whether we acknowledge it or not. And for some people, rejection becomes a place where they try to control the pain, suppress the anger, and it begins to affect them physically. And for some, it starts to show itself in stress. They get stressed over things. Yeah, they get uptight over things because it's not going the way they think, because they want to control the situation so that nothing happens to them. And when a curveball comes, that something happens that is out of their control. Oh, my word, the world comes to an end because I can't control it, so I get stressed. And I can't cope with it because I want to control this so it doesn't happen to me again. Not only does it affect our spirit and our soul, but it affects our body. We're mocked and ridiculed. You're too short, you're too tall, you're too fat, you're too thin, you're the wrong shape, your bum's too big, your bum's too small, you're the wrong colour. She's better than you women. What happens if your husband was to come home, you're driving the car, and I've never done this to Jenny, so this is just an example. You're driving along in the car. God, Jenny, she's beautiful, isn't she? She's better than you. How would that affect your wife? Apart from she'd walk out the car and divorce you. But how would that affect your wife? If you said that. Some men do that and think it's funny. Hey, I've heard men do that. Look at the clothes she's wearing. They're nicer than your clothes. You don't say that to your wife. Think of the rejection and the horrible side that of something you're putting on your wife, all because you're an idiot. Men. You don't say that to your wife at all, ever. Have I ever said that? No. Thank you. I'll pay you later. But think, we say things that we think are funny, and yet they can be very cutting to a person. It causes rejection. It causes rejection. Now, I've said all that to get to the main point this morning. What I call the root of rejection. Now you'll see a tree from Google Images. Thanks to my wife, she Google Images. I got a tree, nice green leaves, nice trunk, and the roots are going in the ground. In fact, what's the significance of the roots? You can't see them. You don't know they're there, but you know the quality of the root by the type of fruit that comes on the branches. So if you want to know what the roots are like, you've only got to look at the fruit on the tree and you'll know what the roots are like. Pretty simple. The roots are hidden, yet they're vital to the tree. In fact, quite often with a tree, not yet, take it back one, thanks. Yeah, quite often, the roots are as big or as long as the tree is high. For however tall the tree is, the roots are in the ground that deep. So that tells me that for whatever comes out of our life, the root is there matching the strength of the rejection that we portray in our behaviour. And we can hide it, we can mask it, I think this is funny, the lengths people will go to try and act like they're not. And I sit there and think, yeah, I can tell you this. Oh well, off they go. Roots are the source of feeding and nourishment. They go deep in the ground. They've developed over many years. And in terms of rejection also has roots. It sustains the fruit that is seen on our lives. And not every root that we have in our life is rejection root. Not every root in our life is negative. We have strong positive roots as well. So I'm not just trying to put a negative, but I'm talking about rejection. So that's all I'm bothered about at this moment in time. But that rejection sustains attitudes, responses, behaviours that have been in a person's life for a long time. There's the old phrase, in fact it was said yesterday in jest, you shake the hand of someone while they're stabbing you in the back. Yeah? We had that conversation yesterday. You shake some people's hands and you're wondering what they're doing with the other hand while they're stabbing you in the back. And they're going around saying things about you to people. And then when you say something to them, they wonder, how dare you say something to me? Well, don't say it then. Don't go around saying it in the first place. But how does it affect us? It affects us, just some examples. And I'm trying to be quite broad. I don't know the ins and outs of your life. From childhood, from school, from friends, brothers, sisters, parents, work colleagues, places you've been to, things that have been said to you, things that have been done to you. But there's three types of rejection that generally exist. The three main roots that bring all the negative attitude and behaviour are as follows, Vanessa. So one of them is rebellion. The second one is self-protection. Press the button again. Or fear of rejection. And the third one is self-rejection. Okay, now I don't have time to explain what the fruit is. That's next week. But I do want to explain what this root system is all about, because this is the things that are inside of us and we don't even know it's there at times. Jesus said in Matthew 7, every tree is known by its fruit. In fact, Jenny spoke on trees and root systems about a year and a half ago, if you remember. But every tree is known by its fruit. So you can tell a lot about a person by the things that they say, the way they behave, but what they do, their attitude, their responses to things. And it no matter how we mask it, we just watch and see. You know, you don't go to a tree with rotten fruit and then, I wonder. It's obvious. It's obvious. Now, a root. Rebellion. Self-protection or fear of rejection. Self-protection or fear of rejection, self-rejection. Next week I'm going to go through some explanation of what they all mean and how you can see behaviours, patterns. For example, self-rejection. So a person to be rejected, they turn it on themselves, they, sense of inadequate, sense of I'm worth nothing, I'm nobody, people don't like me, and then to the extreme, people self-harm, people drink too much, people get cutting and harsh with other people as a means to rejecting themselves. Self-protection is that wall of protection that gets put up around you because you fear being rejected again. So you want to control everything that goes on so that things don't have a negative effect on you in the future. And it's like self-preservation. It's happened once, it's happened twice, it ain't going to happen again. So you know what, I'm going to protect me and I'm going to reject you. And yet we think we're doing ourselves a favour by putting a fortress around us where we're not. The rebellion is that place where we get harsh with people, we get overbearing with people, we get angry with people, we generally suppress emotions, and all of a sudden it's like a bottle of pop, whoosh, all the emotions that's been suppressed in a person comes out of them. And then people think, what's gone on? What's happened there? Well, it's just the emotion has been inside of them for so long. And some people, depends your character. Because, some people, in dealing with these, there are two ways people will respond. The rejection will become outwardly visible to people. In other words, they become over-emotional, overbearing and aggressive. But then there's the other sort who get inwardly, who express their rejection on their own inside. They try to control and suppress emotion. They control relationships, who they will speak to, who they won't speak to. And they think, well, I'm not going to talk to you because you might reject me. I'm going to keep away from you. And we think we're doing ourselves a favour, and yet we are selling ourselves short of making friends of God's people who could help and influence you and change your life and put you in places where you believe God wants you to go, and yet, no, I'm going to keep away from you. That control, internal emotion that is like a dam that's waiting to break and waiting for all the emotion to come out. The problem with rejection is whether we identify it or not is still there. The problem, whether we deal with it or not, is still there. The problem is if we don't want to look at it, is still there. If we don't want to identify it and we want to apply this to everybody else but ourselves, it's still there. And for many of us, we've said this before, especially in the discipleship school, our reactions can be subconscious. For many of us, we don't even realise we're doing it. We don't even realise we're behaving that way. Because it's become a part of who we are for so long that we don't realise what we're doing. And every root will produce fruit. And we know what a fruit is. A fruit is a product or result of something. So the fruit that we want to bear, do you all want to be fruitful? I'm sure we do. Do you want to have fruitful marriages? Yes, we do. Do you want fruitful relationships? Yes, we do. But we can't deal with the fruit, we have to deal with the rejection root. So the fruit is there. We need to identify the fruit by dealing with the root system. I had a friend, I've told you about Andy. Andy died, I told you that, of leukemia. And I remember when his first son was born, Cameron. I don't know whether he was born or being born, whether Sharon was expecting. But they lived in a row of terraced houses in Lincoln. And tiny little house at the front, just a little door and window, but it was just like a TARDIS. He just went back forever, massive house, but tiny at the front. And he decided that he wanted to make a play area for when his son was born. So me being stupid, I offered to help him. So I went up one Saturday morning and I got a saw, I got a pickaxe, I got my dad's, can't think what it's called. Tool to try and dig out the root. Anyway, we started Saturday morning. We didn't think it would be that big because the tree wasn't that big. It was probably only about that big, the trunk of the tree. But we were there till early evening and we still hadn't finished. We had to go back the following weekend because we could not get this tree out of the ground, out of the garden. The root system had gone so deep that you dug out the soil, then you tried to saw some of the roots. Then you dug a bit more, then you were pushing and pulling this way, then you tried to push and pull that way, then you try and, run and do a karate kick on it, all these stupid things. We were trying to loosen the root system of the tree to be able to get the tree out. Nearly killed us. Summer's day, nice hot day. But that's what it's like in our lives with some of us. The roots have become so ingrained in the soil of our life that it's going to take a bit of effort to pull them out. You can't just say, Lord, bless me, bless Tom, and all who's sailing it, and then expect life to be wonderful. Sometimes it takes an honest assessment of our own life. It takes an honest assessment of our attitudes and behaviours, and a recognition of what we like, a recognition. And you know what? We need a pair of courage. You thought I was going to say something else, don't you? How dare you think that? We need to be courageous and bold in this, because if we don't, those things stay in our life and they don't get dealt with. And then some of the arguments you have with people and some of the arguments husbands and wives have come out of the rejection that you felt in your life. It's not really over, did you put the cup in the sink or next to the sink? Or did you put your dirty washing in the basket? Or did you leave the crumbs on the table? That may be there, but sometimes our reaction to that, you think, why did you react to the cup being there? Why did you react so aggressively to it not being there today? Because maybe there's been experiences that you've had where things have happened in your life that when somebody says something to you, it causes you to overreact and explode. When really, all that was asking you to do is to shift the plate from there to there. Did it really matter? Or put your dirty undies in the basket or something like that, and instead of chucking them on the floor. No one does that, do they? But fruit, how can we recognise, and I'll finish with this, time is gone. How can we recognise some of the rejection in us? Through the words we speak. Because words explain, reveal and inform. And what I will do is I will give you 3 lists next week of words that will explain the root of rejection for rebellion, the root of rejection for self-rejection, and the root of rejection for the fear or self-protection. I will give you a series of words and you will listen to them or read them. And you read one and say, lack of confidence. Maybe. But there's nothing else in that group that resonates with you. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a root of rejection there. It's just maybe you lack a bit of confidence in a certain area. Okay? So we don't want to get over the top with this. However, if you were to look at it and think, for rebellion, arrogant, harsh, sarcastic, unwilling to submit to people, don't like leaders. You think, the person who has a rebellious root. I've worked with people like that. Don't matter who their boss is, they hate them. Why? Because when they were 15, their boss had to go at them over something, and now everybody who's their boss, they don't like him. And yet, why? There's nothing wrong with the person. I don't like them. Anyway, I'll explain this more next week.